Hey everyone, welcome back. Here's a quick question before we dive in to talk about task initiation and follow through. When you say you struggle to get things done, do you actually know which part is breaking down? Because I talk to neurodivergent business owners all the time who've been trying to fix the wrong thing for years. They think they have a starting problem, so they buy every productivity app ever made, and none of them help because the real problem was never starting, it was finishing. Or the opposite, they've convinced themselves they're procrastinators when actually they start things constantly. They can't get those things across the finish line. Today, we're separating these things completely so that we can actually start solving the right problem. Hi, if you don't know me, my name is Shannon Schroeder. I am the F-Bomb coach, and I help ADHD business women build sustainable systems for their businesses. So let's talk about why this distinction matters. It matters to have the right diagnosis before you start looking for solutions. If you have a finishing problem and you spend all of your energy on starting rituals and motivation hacks, you're going to get really good at starting things, but you're still going to have a pile of half-finished projects. And then you're going to feel like a failure because those strategies should have worked. The truth is they were never designed for your actual problem. Starting and finishing involve overlapping but meaningfully different executive function skills. And once you know which one is actually struggling for you, then you can create a path that makes sense. So let's get clear on the terms. Task initiation is specifically about activation, getting started. So starting up your engine, right? And for a lot of ADHD brains, the engine doesn't turn over automatically the way it might for a neurotypical brain. It needs a spark. And that spark is usually one of four things: interest, urgency, challenge, or novelty. If none of those things are present, the brain just doesn't want to engage. Not because you're not choosing to, but because the neurological trigger isn't there. This is why you can sit in front of a task for hours and do nothing. And then when you get a text saying, hey, this is due today, and all of a sudden you can get it done in 45 minutes. The task itself didn't change. The urgency did. That's a task initiation problem. And it looks a lot like procrastination from the outside, but it's really not the same thing. So how do you know if you have a task initiation problem? If you know exactly what to do but can't make yourself start, if tasks sit untouched until a deadline creates urgency, you feel frozen even on things you actually want to do. You need a specific mood, environment, or trigger to begin. Starting feels like the hardest part, and once you start, you're usually fine. Now, for task initiation, the biggest tell is really that last one. Once you get started, you're usually okay. You might even hit a flow state. The project itself isn't the problem. Getting into the project is the problem. Another one I hear a lot is I need everything to be just right before I can start. The right time of day, the right environment, the right mental state. That's your brain looking for the activation conditions it needs, which is a real thing, but it also means that you've got very few windows where starting feels possible. And that's what we're working with when we're working on task initiation. Now let's talk about follow through. This is a different animal. Where task initiation is about activation, follow through is about sustainability, keeping the engine running once it's going. And the core issue here is dopamine. The ADHD brain gets a hit of dopamine when something is new and exciting. You start a project, the dopamine is there, the energy is there, everything feels possible. And then somewhere around the middle, the signal drops off. The task isn't new anymore, but the end isn't close enough for you to feel like, oh, the reward is in sight. And so your brain starts looking around for something that will give it that signal back, that dopamine hit, which is usually something new and shiny that has nothing to do with the project at hand. That's not weakness, and we treat it like it's a weakness, but that is a predictable neurochemical pattern. And there are specific ways that you can work with it. So, how do you know if you have a follow-through problem? If you start things easily, finishing is the problem. Projects stall at like the 70 to 80% mark. You lose interest once something stops feeling new. You have lots of almost done things sitting around. You're great at launches, but terrible at the follow-up. Again, let's look at that last one. The classic follow-through profile is someone who is great at starting. They're energetic, they're excited, they launch with everything they've got, and then they have a graveyard of almost finished projects. If that's you, no amount of task initiation is going to fix that. You're already starting fine. The problem is the middle and the end. And the last one, that great at launches, is terrible at following up, that comes up constantly with entrepreneurs. The launch is exciting. There's urgency. There's novelty. There's the audience right there in your face. The follow-up emails, the post-launch debrief, the cleaning up of the back end, there is no dopamine to be had there. Nobody's watching you. There is no deadline. And that makes it boring. So without the dopamine, there is nothing to make you want to do it. That's a follow-through problem in a very specific context. And unfortunately, you might have both. I want to be clear that this is not always clean, like you're always task initiation or you're always a follow-through problem. Some people genuinely struggle with both, or they struggle with different ones in different contexts. You might be totally fine starting creative work, but can't initiate admin tasks to save your life. And you might be great at following through on a client project, but never finish your own stuff. That is all useful information. The point of separating these two things isn't to put yourself in a box. It's so that you can look at specific stuck points and then ask yourself the right question. Right now, in this situation, is the problem that I can't start or that I can't finish? Because the answer is going to change what you do next. So let's talk strategies. If task initiation is your issue, the through line in all of these strategies is about making it easier for that neurological start signal to fire. The 2-minute fake out works because your brain's objection is usually to the whole task, not to 2 minutes of it. So you lower the bar so your brain's like, okay, I could do that. It's only 2 minutes. Environmental triggers. These work because you're essentially training your brain to understand a specific set of cues means we're working now. Over time, the ritual of those environmental triggers will become the activation signal. Inject urgency. This is recreating those conditions that already work for your brain. So tell someone you're going to have something done by a specific time. That way you're creating those conditions that work for you instead of just hoping that they happen on accident. First action only. Don't plan the whole task. You're not looking at the whole thing. The first action is what's important. Don't sit down to work on the project. Sit down to open the doc and read the last paragraph. That's it. That's all you have to do is that first action. Because again, the first action will lead to you doing more. And then temptation bundling. Pair the task with something enjoyable that you only get during that task. I'm going to write emails today and I'm going to have my favorite playlist on. Or I'm going to plan out my social media content for the month while my favorite TV show is playing. Give yourself the reward in the moment. So you're bundling things together to make it more enjoyable. Follow through strategies. The through line here is sustaining the reward signal, like those dopamine hits, giving your brain enough dopamine to keep going until you hit the natural reward of I finished it, I did the thing. Defining done before you start is important because without a clear finish line, your brain has no idea when it's supposed to feel satisfied. To say, I have to write emails, that's not very specific. How many emails? How long do they have to be? Am I scheduling them? There's a lot there. So decide ahead of time what done is going to be before you start doing, so then your brain knows when they've hit the finish line. You can work forever and still feel like you haven't done enough unless you know what the done line is. Shrinking the project. We talk about this all the time. What is the smallest thing you can do? The faster you get yourself a win, the better it's going to be for your brain. You're going to tighten that feedback loop of I did the thing, I did the thing. Mid-project dopamine hits. This means that you're creating artificial finish lines along the way. You're giving yourself some milestones. If you draft 5 emails, you get a reward. You schedule those 5 emails, you get a reward. So instead of saying you have to do all of it at once And 5 is arbitrary. Maybe for you, it's going to be 2. Maybe it's going to be 1 because you hate writing emails. Doesn't matter. But what you're doing is you are creating those artificial lines, those checkpoints, those milestones along the way so that you get that moment of acknowledgement. It's not a huge celebration. It's a moment. It's a moment that your brain says, you did it. You did the thing. That's good. Let's keep going. Body doubling, if you get stuck and you're just like, you need to be able to power through, sometimes going it alone is too much. Body double. You could do co-working sessions, whether it's virtual, in person. It's not about talking. Nobody's helping you. It's just about having that physical presence of another person that's going to keep you going. And the good enough rule is one of the most important things that you can do. Perfectionism lives right at the ends of projects and it will kill it. Decide in advance what done looks like, what is good enough, and then stop when you get there. Because if you struggle with perfectionism, it's always going to be, but I can add more, but I can do more, but is this good enough? You have to decide ahead of time what good enough is. And then when you get there, like, I did it, I'm good. So let's make this practical. Think of something specific you're stuck on right now, not a vague sense of being behind, an actual project or task, and run it through these 3 checks. Have you started it all? If no, or if you keep doing everything except the actual thing, that's task initiation. Did you start strong and hit a wall somewhere in the middle? That's follow through. Have you started and stopped multiple times and it feels hard at every stage? That's both. And you deal with them in order. Get it started, then deal with the middle. The reason I want you to pick something specific is that it's really easy to stay abstract about this stuff. And if you work with a real actual project that you have, you're going to apply it. And we want you to really apply it because that's more valuable than some hypothetical insights. Thank you so much for your time today. If you found this useful, please hit like, subscribe, and share with some other person that you think might need this extra help figuring out their executive function. See you in the next one.